So as I was thinking about this weekend and looking at the readings and the psalm and just what this weekend is about, two things struck me. The psalm, "The Lord is my shepherd, there is nothing I shall want." And it occurred to me that oftentimes, as I live my life, I forget that. But the other thing that really struck home for me was the very simple message about taking the time to rest. Jesus told his disciples to go to a deserted place to rest. And as I was thinking about it, it occurred to me that we need to be sure that we follow God. We need to be sure we allow him to be our shepherd, and we need to rest. As I look at the events of my life, and not just the big events, but the simple everyday, the things that we do, oftentimes without thinking, and I asked myself a very simple question. Do I rest before I begin? And do I allow God to be my shepherd? Or do I do what I usually do and try and take control? I'm astounded by how often that was my answer, that I try to be in charge and I try to be in control. And when I really take the time to look at those events and how they came out, it was amazing to me how many times when I needed to be in control, the result wasn't quite as good as it could have been. So then, as I looked at the readings for today, the other thing that occurred to me was that it repeated the same message. Allow God to be in charge and rest before you begin. And it repeated it and it repeated it. And I thought to myself, why do we need to hear these messages so many times to live our lives the way God asked us to? And I couldn't help but think it had something to do with free will that God gave us, because free will is certainly important to us. It helps us to define who we are and what we're going to do, what will be important in our lives, be it family or job or anything else we get involved in. It helps us to understand our vocation. Should we be living a married life, single life, religious life? And how will our career path affect the vocation that we're called to? But we also need to remember that the free will that God has given us wasn't given to us so that we can take control of our lives, at least not every aspect of our lives. And that's why it's so difficult for us sometimes to remember to allow God to be our shepherd. So what happens when we remember that God is the shepherd? Well, I can only speak for myself, but the answer for me is really quite simple. When I take a step back, when I turn to God and say, lead me, the results are better. And not just a little bit better. The results are vastly better. Relationships grow stronger. The direction that I'm going in life suddenly becomes clearer. At the end of the day, life is just easier. But like so many other times when we are given simple, clear instructions, that if we follow them, life will be easier. Sometimes we walk through life continuing to try and be in control, continuing to make decisions when we're not rested and refreshed and ready. And I think that's probably why we hear these instructions repeatedly as we read through the Gospels and we read through any of the readings, as we listen to the Psalms. So as you leave here today, I ask that you spend a little time thinking about your own life and ask yourself, do I rest when I'm tired? And do I follow my shepherd?